Today, we will proceed with consideration of the fiscal year 2025 concurrent resolution on the budget. I want to thank the ranking member, Mr. Boyle, for working with me to develop a structure for this markup that closely follows what has been done in the recent past with our last budget resolution and last debate in markup in that regard. Our goal is to have a markup in which both sides will have the opportunity to debate the framework for the fiscal year 25 concurrent budget resolution. I thank everyone for their cooperation. Consistent with the agreement that I've reached with my friend Mr. Boyle, without objection, the ranking member, Mr. Boyle, and I will each have 5 minutes to make opening statements. Members will each be recognized for 3-minute statements. Members have 7 days to submit additional statements for the record. The document will be considered as read and open for amendment at any point. The amendments considered by the committee will be those submitted pursuant to the agreement I made with Mr. Boyle. The debate time for each amendment will be limited to 10 minutes. Debate time will be equally divided between the sponsor of the amendment and a member opposed. And to accommodate floor votes later today, the chairman is authorized to declare recess at any time, and the committee to roll any request for a roll call vote. I would like to thank everyone for joining us here today, and the people watching on their television sets. I sound like I'm from the 80s or 70s. Back at home, dozens of you glued to your TVs, and what we're going to say, I hope you are, because what we're going to say is important, and what we're doing here is important as we comply with the 1974 Congressional Budget Act in considering this resolution. We talk about the budget process. Well, the first part of integrity and consistency in compliance with this process is to put forward and mark up a budget resolution. Today, we will consider this resolution. I'm proud to report that the passage of the resolution today, and I presume it will pass, will mark just the second time in history that the Budget Committee will pass a budget resolution before the President releases his budget. And since 1994, there's only been one other year that the Budget Committee passed a budget resolution earlier than we did today. That's the bar I'm setting for you, ranking member, for future leadership. And I thank all my members for their cooperation in that endeavor. Now I yield myself 5 minutes for an opening statement. Today, President Biden will try to convince the American people that the State of the Union is good and that our lives are better. For the sake of our country, I wish it were so, but unfortunately, it couldn't be further from the truth. After 3 years of one self-inflicted crisis after another, President Biden will not only not be able to suspend reality, he won't be able to convince the American people of his words because of his recent actions. The American people just know better. Under the failed leadership of President Biden, their country has become weaker and more vulnerable, both at home and abroad. Americans know they are much less safe and secure today than they were 3 years ago. Record violent crime has ripped through our once great American cities. Record illegal immigration, bringing record drugs, crime, criminals, flows of migrants, record migrant deaths, all the while costing taxpayers upwards of $200 billion a year. On top of that, the world's become more destabilized. Our adversaries are emboldened, our allies are being threatened, costing taxpayers hundreds of billions of dollars, and more importantly, America's respect and leadership in the world. Americans know they have less money in their pocket, a lower standard of living, and little hope that their economic future will improve. Why? Record spending and borrowing to the tune of $6 trillion over the last 3 years has put our nation at the highest levels of indebtedness in our 250-year history, surpassing World War II, resulting in record inflation, record interest rates, a cost of living crisis that's crushing our working Americans. It's no surprise that Moody's and Fitch credit rating agencies have downgraded not only our credit rating, but our fiscal and economic outlook along with it. Ladies and gentlemen, the facts are irrefutable. Our deficit spending is out of control, our national debt's unsustainable, and the fiscal state of the union is in rapid decline. Today, while President Biden talks about the State of the Union, Republicans on the Budget Committee today here in this room are taking action to revive the fiscal state of our union by passing our fiscal year 25 budget resolution, a budget blueprint to restore fiscal responsibility by reining in spending, reigniting economic growth, and putting our nation on a path to balance. This fiscal framework will balance the budget in 10 years by reducing deficit spending by a little over $14 trillion and reducing the debt to GDP by 40 points. We achieved these savings without cutting Medicare, Social Security, and veterans' benefits. Instead, we propose our recently passed bipartisan fiscal commission to find consensus solutions to strengthening and saving these important safety net programs while addressing our $120 trillion long-term unfunded liability. Here's our plan. First, we right-size the bloated bureaucracy that's grown 40% since COVID, hundreds of billions of dollars. The FRA was a good step, but there are hundreds of billions of dollars in unnecessary and wasteful spending in that part of our budget. Next, we reverse President Biden's spending spree, student loan bailouts, hundreds of billions of dollars, expanding welfare without work, and then many of the provisions of the IRA, including 87,000 IRS agents, green corporate energy tax subsidies, expanded Obamacare to people making over $500,000, unnecessary, wasteful, and not the mission of the federal government. Third, we rein in runaway mandatory spending through entitlement reforms. These are the debt drivers. Mandatory spending makes up 73% of our budget today. In 10 years, CBO says it'll be 80%, but it represents 90% of our growth in spending. We must address it if we want to reverse the curse of a debt crisis. Fourth, we root out rampant waste and fraudulent spending. According to GAO, that's over $2 trillion. Fifth, we reignite growth and prosperity by locking in lower taxes, by rolling back the barrage of expensive and unnecessary regulations, unleash American energy independence, and get back to America First trade policies. Look, we all know our current fiscal trajectory is unsustainable and the catastrophic and irreparable harm that will come to this country if we fail to act. The only other time in American history that our debt to GDP or our nation's indebtedness has been this high was in the aftermath of World War II. We were not only able to recover from that, but the United States emerged as the world's only superpower. The greatest generation inherently understood their moral obligation to, as George Washington stated in his farewell address, not ungenerously throw upon posterity the burden of debt which we ourselves ought to bear. The greatest generation had a simple strategy, but not an easy one. They persisted in the difficult task of reducing government spending and unleashing economic growth. Friends on both sides of the aisle, if we demonstrate that same sense of urgency, persistence, and political courage, we will preserve America's leadership in the world and secure the blessings of liberty for our children. But if we don't, we will be the first of our nation's leaders to leave the next generation not with a better and brighter future, but with a worse and weaker country than we ourselves inherited. A public debt is indeed a public curse, and we must reverse it. With that, I yield to my ranking member 5 minutes for his opening statement.